You believe discipline is proven when someone is watching you. That belief is already your weakness. What do you do when the room is empty, when the record is off, when no one will ever know whether you acted or hesitated? If a sword is only raised for an audience, is it still a sword or just decoration? If water only flows when contained, is it still water or merely obedience shaped by fear? Miyamoto Musashi followed a rule that did not depend on witnesses, praise, or outcomes. He lived by it when silence was complete. If you stay until the end, you will see why this rule builds identity where motivation collapses. Daniel Harper was 38 years old, though his body moved with the caution of someone older. He lived in a narrow townhouse at the edge of a quiet suburb where mornings arrived without ceremony. His wife, Emily, left earlier than he did, moving through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, their words exchanged lightly and without friction. Their son, Noah, was 8, still half asleep when Daniel tied his shoes by the door, still trusting enough to believe that adults always knew what they were doing. Daniel worked as a facility supervisor for a municipal building complex. It was unglamorous, necessary, and invisible when done correctly. He unlocked doors, logged maintenance requests, replaced light fixtures, and ensured that systems ran without interruption. His name was rarely spoken aloud. When it was, it meant something had gone wrong. He was competent enough to remain employed, reliable enough to avoid attention, and careful enough to never be accused of failure in any formal sense. His days followed a steady rhythm: morning traffic, a desk with scuffed edges, coffee that cooled before it was finished. Evenings spent helping Noah with homework, nodding at Emily's plans for the next week, falling asleep with the television murmuring to an empty room. From the outside, nothing appeared broken. Inside, something had been quietly set aside. There had been a moment months earlier, brief and unremarkable to anyone else. A meeting room, a pause before speaking. Noah had been seated in the back, waiting patiently, watching his father listen while an opportunity passed across the table. Daniel had known what to say. He had felt the timing close. He had waited one breath too long. Someone else spoke. The room moved on. Noah looked up once, then back down at his hands. Nothing dramatic followed. No confrontation, no raised voices, just the settling of something that could not be retrieved. Daniel did not mention it again. No one asked him to. But the silence of that moment began to follow him, steady and unrelenting, into every ordinary day. The pressure did not arrive as urgency. It arrived as repetition. Daniel began to notice how often his days required him to decide something small, and how often he delayed those decisions just long enough for them to be made by someone else. A work order left unanswered until the afternoon, a suggestion held back until the meeting had already shifted direction, a conversation with Emily postponed until fatigue made it unnecessary. Each delay was reasonable on its own. Together, they formed a pattern that did not announce itself. At work, a systems upgrade was scheduled for the building's access controls. Daniel had reviewed the documentation weeks earlier. He understood the vulnerabilities and the necessary changes. During the briefing, the project lead asked if anyone had concerns before implementation. Daniel felt the answer rise and stall. He measured the room. He waited for confirmation that the moment was safe. The pause lengthened. The project moved forward without him. 2 weeks later, a security failure locked several departments out during operating hours. The blame settled elsewhere. Daniel's silence went unnoticed. So did his knowledge. That evening, Noah stood in the doorway of Daniel's home office, holding a school permission slip. It required a signature by morning. Daniel nodded without turning from the screen. Minutes passed. The paper remained unsigned. Noah waited longer than necessary, then placed it quietly on the desk and left. Daniel signed it later, after the house had gone still, after the moment of being needed had already expired. The crisis was not visible. It had no sharp edge. It was the accumulation of moments where Daniel neither advanced nor retreated. He stood still while time continued. One afternoon, he caught his reflection in a glass partition at work, frozen mid-step, uncertain whether to enter a room where a decision was being made. He remained there until the door closed on its own. There was a meeting weeks later, similar to the first. This time, Noah was not present. The opportunity passed again. Daniel felt no surprise, only confirmation. He walked back to his desk and completed the tasks already assigned, precise and efficient. On the drive home, traffic slowed without cause. Daniel rested his hands on the steering wheel and waited, unmoving, though there was space ahead of him. Cars changed lanes around him, He remained where he was, neither obstructing nor progressing, until a horn broke the silence and forced him forward. That night, after Noah was asleep, Daniel stood alone in the kitchen. He did not reach for anything. He did not leave. He stood until the stillness became uncomfortable, until it revealed itself as a choice he had been making repeatedly without naming it. The shift did not come through inspiration. It arrived through something smaller and harder to ignore. Daniel had taken Noah to the public library on a Saturday morning, an unremarkable routine meant to occupy a few quiet hours. While Noah wandered between shelves, Daniel drifted toward the back, where books were stacked not by demand, but by endurance. He pulled one volume at random, thin and unadorned, its spine worn smooth by hands that had not been hurried. It contained fragments of thought attributed to Miyamoto Musashi, passages from the Bushido, and reflections drawn from the Book of Earth and the Book of Void. One line held him longer than the rest. It spoke of walking alone, not as isolation, but as refusal to lean on witnesses. Another described discipline as something formed before form, action before recognition. Musashi did not describe triumph. He described removal, the removal of excess movement, the removal of explanation, the removal of dependence on outcome. Daniel closed the book without checking it out. He did not need to own it. The idea had already taken hold. Musashi had lived by a rule that was not reinforced by praise or fear. When no one was watching, the sword was still lifted. When no one commanded it, the water still moved. That evening, Daniel did not announce a change. He did not plan a transformation. He sat at the kitchen table after everyone had gone to bed and wrote a single sentence on a scrap of paper. It was not a goal, it was a condition. He would act at the first correct moment, without waiting for safety, approval, or certainty. Not occasionally, not when convenient, every time. There was no comfort in this decision. It did not promise relief. It removed an excuse. Daniel folded the paper and placed it in his wallet, not as a reminder, but as a boundary. From that point forward, hesitation would no longer be invisible. It would be a violation. He set his alarm for 4 in the morning, earlier than necessary, earlier than justified. As he lay in the dark, sleep resisted him. The rule was already at work. There was no audience for this moment. No one would know if he changed his mind. The sword was not raised yet. The water had not moved, but the condition had been set, and silence was no longer neutral. The alarm sounded at 4 in the morning without ceremony. It did not ease Daniel awake. It cut into the dark like a blade drawn too early. His hand moved toward the edge of the bed and stopped halfway, suspended in the space between intention and retreat. The room was silent. Emily slept undisturbed. Noah's door remained closed. There was no witness to what would follow. For several seconds, Daniel did nothing. The body negotiated quietly. Another hour would change nothing. One morning did not define a life. The arguments arrived fully formed, familiar, and reasonable. He listened without responding. Then he stood up. The floor was cold. The house felt larger at that hour, stripped of its daytime obligations. In the kitchen, he filled a glass with water and drank it slowly, not to wake himself but to mark the moment. The water did not rush, it did not resist. It moved because movement was its nature. Daniel understood then that discipline did not require force. It required removal of alternatives. He stepped outside while the sky remained uncommitted to light. The air was sharp and unwelcoming. As he began to move, his posture straightened without instruction. In his mind, the sword appeared not as violence, but as clarity. A sword does not argue with itself. It cuts what is unnecessary and leaves the rest untouched. There was no satisfaction in this first morning, only alignment. He returned home before the world noticed he had left. Nothing had changed outwardly. Yet something had been placed where hesitation used to live. The rule had been obeyed once. That was enough to make the next morning unavoidable. The second morning was harder than the first. The novelty had already evaporated, leaving only the weight of repetition. The alarm sounded again at 4, unchanged in tone or timing, indifferent to Daniel's effort the day before. His body remembered the cold floor, the quiet house, the uninviting dark beyond the door. Memory did not make the movement easier. It only removed surprise. Days began to stack without distinction. Wake, water, movement, return. There were no milestones to measure progress, no visible reward to justify continuation. Daniel did not feel strengthened by the routine. He felt exposed by it. Each morning asked the same question and accepted no variation in the answer. The sword did not become lighter. The water did not become warmer. At work, nothing improved immediately. Daniel continued to unlock doors and log requests. Meetings remained procedural. His role stayed small. The discipline he practiced before dawn did not translate into visible advancement by midday. This absence of feedback tested him more than fatigue. The mind searched for confirmation. None arrived. On the fifth morning, he considered adjusting the time. 15 minutes would still be early. No one would know. The thought passed through him and met resistance, not from emotion, but from the rule itself. The condition had not included negotiation. It had removed it. He rose at 4 and moved without further debate. Monotony began to strip the practice of personality. The actions no longer felt chosen. They simply occurred. Daniel noticed that his attention during these hours sharpened, not because he tried to focus, but because there was nothing left to distract him. The water of effort flowed where it was directed, no longer splashing against unnecessary edges. The sword of intention remained drawn, not in tension, but in readiness. Weeks passed. The routine did not expand. It did not evolve. It endured. Daniel did not speak of it to anyone. There was nothing to explain. The discipline belonged to the silence that created it. When the day arrived fully and the world resumed its noise, something within him remained unaffected, steady, and uninterested in being noticed. The weather changed without regard for routine. Rain arrived first, then wind that pressed against the body, as if testing intent. On one morning, the sky opened fully, emptying itself onto the streets in sheets that erased distance and softened edges. Daniel stood at the doorway, shoes already on, listening to the sound of water striking concrete. The thought of remaining inside did not feel like failure. It felt sensible. He stepped out anyway. The rain soaked through his clothes within minutes. The cold no longer announced itself sharply. It settled in layers, dull and persistent. His breath shortened, muscles tightened. There was no attempt to push through. He moved at the pace required to continue moving, nothing more. Pain presented itself as information, not as a signal to stop. The body adapted without commentary. On another morning, exhaustion arrived before movement began. The previous day had extended late. Noah had needed help with a school project that refused to resolve cleanly. Daniel had stayed awake longer than planned, listening more than speaking, adjusting small details without being asked. When the alarm sounded hours later, the body responded slowly. Standing required effort. The storm was internal this time. He did not adjust the rule. He adjusted the execution. The water found a narrower path. The sword cut away speed and kept direction. He moved less, but he moved. These mornings taught him something Musashi had written without explanation. Discipline was not intensity preserved. It was alignment maintained. The storm did not require resistance. It required orientation. Wind and rain were conditions, not obstacles. Fatigue was a state, not a verdict. At work, Daniel began to notice the effects without seeking them. When a system malfunctioned unexpectedly, he addressed it without delay or consultation. He did not wait for permission. He acted at the first correct moment. The decision did not feel bold. It felt obvious. When asked later why he had moved so quickly, he answered simply, there was nothing else to do. The storm continued to arrive in different forms. Weather, fatigue, uncertainty. None of it altered the rule. Each morning, the water moved. Each day, the sword remained present, not raised in defense, but held in readiness, unbothered by conditions beyond its control. Temptation did not announce itself as desire. It appeared as efficiency. Shortcuts presented themselves quietly, framed as improvements. Daniel noticed how easily he could compress the routine, how small adjustments could preserve the appearance of discipline while hollowing it out. A later alarm justified by productivity, a lighter morning justified by a demanding evening. Each suggestion arrived with logic intact. He examined these thoughts without engaging them. The rule had never been about visible effort, it had been about position. Musashi had written of standing in the correct place before striking, of the battle being decided by alignment long before blades met. The sword did not move early, it did not move late. It moved when movement was correct. To alter the rule was to abandon position. At work, a new project required coordination across departments. Meetings multiplied. Decisions slowed. Daniel found himself again at the edge of speaking. The old pattern approached, familiar and patient. This time, he did not prepare an explanation. He did not measure the room. He spoke when the opening appeared, briefly, and without embellishment. The room adjusted, the conversation shifted. No one acknowledged the moment as significant. Daniel did not expect them to. At home, Noah asked fewer questions and waited less. The change was subtle. When a problem appeared, Daniel addressed it directly. Not urgently, not dramatically, simply without delay. Emily noticed that conversations no longer circled the same points. Daniel responded when response was required. Silence returned sooner. The temptation to explain the change arose once, during a quiet evening. He resisted it. Explanation would have invited evaluation. Evaluation would have invited retreat. The discipline belonged to a place that did not require defense. The water continued to flow, not expanding beyond its channel, not evaporating under pressure. The sword remained drawn in principle, not in threat. Daniel understood now that unbroken spirit was not endurance of suffering. It was refusal to fracture alignment for comfort. Each morning preserved position. Each day confirmed it. Nothing external marked this phase. No recognition arrived. No visible milestone separated before from after. The absence of affirmation tested the rule one final time. Daniel did not adjust. The discipline had already moved beyond effort. It had begun to shape who arrived at each moment, regardless of ease. The change became noticeable only through absence. Daniel no longer hesitated at thresholds. Doors opened when they needed to open. Conversations began when they needed to begin. Decisions occurred without internal delay. There was no sense of acceleration, only removal. The weight that had once accompanied choice had been cut away. People responded without naming what they sensed. At work, requests were directed to him earlier. Not because he demanded authority, but because his presence no longer required assessment. He occupied space without apology or claim. The sword had ceased to be an image of action and had become an image of boundary. It defined what entered and what did not. The water had also changed. It no longer rushed or tested its edges. It moved steadily, unaffected by attention. When pressure increased, it did not resist. It adjusted its depth. Daniel recognized this as the quiet radiance Musashi had lived by. Discipline that shines does so without reflection. It does not announce itself, it simply alters the field around it. At home, Noah began to mirror small behaviors without instruction. Shoes were placed where they belonged. Homework began earlier. There was no conversation about it. Alignment had replaced enforcement. Emily noticed that Daniel listened without drifting, responded without delay, and remained present without effort. The mornings continued unchanged. 4 o'clock remained 4 o'clock. The water was still cold. The air was still unwelcoming. None of it mattered. Discipline had moved from practice to position. The rule was no longer something he followed. It was something he stood within. In the absence of struggle, clarity deepened. Daniel understood that the sword and the water were no longer tools. They were reflections. One cut away excess. The other accepted form without surrender. Together, they held him steady, unobserved, exactly where he needed to be. The test arrived without warning and without drama. It did not announce itself as a challenge. It appeared as a familiar arrangement of people, timing, and consequence, assembled in a way Daniel recognized too late to avoid. A cross-department review had been called after a minor incident escalated into public scrutiny. The room was narrow, the agenda was tight. Accountability hovered without attaching itself to a name. Daniel took a seat near the center. He noticed the same glass partition he had once hesitated before, the same table edges worn smooth by years of indecision. This time, Noah was not present, but the memory of that earlier silence remained, fixed and immovable. The original moment had never been corrected. It had only been carried forward. As the discussion unfolded, explanations accumulated, language thickened, responsibility diffused. Daniel listened without preparing his turn. He observed the pattern forming, the familiar delay before truth surfaced. He recognized the precise instant when speaking would interrupt comfort without causing disorder. The moment arrived and held, brief and exact. He did nothing. The room continued, words layered over words. The opening began to close. This was the edge where the past had claimed him. He felt the stillness settle, not as paralysis, but as presence. The sword was not raised, the water did not surge. Everything aligned into a narrow point of clarity. He spoke. There was no emphasis in his voice, no defense, no explanation beyond necessity. He identified the failure, its cause, and the correction already underway. He accepted responsibility without ornament and redirected attention without accusation. The room adjusted immediately. The tension did not dissipate. It resolved. Silence followed, not discomfort. Recognition. Someone nodded once. The meeting moved forward on new terms. No one looked at Daniel as if something extraordinary had occurred. That was the confirmation. The action had been correct because it did not require acknowledgement. Later that afternoon, Daniel stood alone in the building's service corridor, a place no one visited unless something had gone wrong. He remained there briefly, not to reflect, but to register the absence of weight. The original tragedy had not been erased. It had been answered. That evening, traffic slowed again on the same stretch of road. This time, Daniel adjusted without thought. Hands steady on the wheel, he moved when space appeared, neither early nor late. The water found its path. The sword remained present, not in motion, but in readiness. As you listen to this moment, consider where you pause when alignment is required. When the opening appears and closes without you, what rule are you obeying? And who taught it to you? Daniel arrived home on time. Noah met him at the door with a question already forming. Daniel answered without delay. The house settled into quiet. The stillness remained, not as absence, but as completion. The change could not be summarized because it had not occurred all at once. It revealed itself through contrast, visible only when Daniel remembered how he used to move through the same spaces. The mornings were unchanged in structure, but altered in quality. He rose before the alarm finished sounding, not with urgency, but with inevitability. The water was poured. The body moved. There was no internal discussion to resolve. At work, Daniel's presence altered outcomes without requiring authority. When an issue emerged, he addressed it at the first correct moment, neither rushing nor waiting. Colleagues began to defer, not out of respect, but out of clarity. Decisions moved faster around him because hesitation no longer gathered. He did not volunteer for visibility. It followed him anyway, lightly, without weight. At home, the rhythm tightened. Evenings unfolded without the dull friction of postponement. When Noah asked for help, Daniel responded fully or not at all, never halfway. There was no longer a need to recover missed moments because fewer were missed. Emily noticed that silence had returned to their conversations, not as distance, but as shared ground. Words were used only when they served their purpose. The original failure remained intact. It had not been redeemed or reframed. It had simply lost its control. The gravity that once pulled Daniel backward no longer determined his position. He had learned what Musashi had written without emphasis. The battle is decided before conflict appears. The sword is not raised to win. It is held so that winning is unnecessary. The water does not force its way forward. It arrives because nothing blocks it. Daniel did not feel transformed. He felt aligned. Identity had formed without declaration, shaped by mornings no one witnessed and decisions no one applauded. He no longer measured himself against outcomes. He measured himself against position. When alignment was correct, action followed without strain. The world did not change around him. Its demands remained. Its pressures continued. What changed was Daniel's relationship to them. He no longer waited to be compelled. He moved when movement was correct, and remained still when stillness was required. The discipline had completed its work by disappearing into behavior. The sword rested without rust. The water flowed without disturbance. Daniel stood within both, unobserved, unchanged in appearance, exact in position. The transformation was complete because it no longer required proof. Miyamoto Musashi did not build himself through intensity or recognition. He removed what interfered until only alignment remained. When no one was watching, the sword was still held correctly. When nothing demanded effort, the water still moved in its natural course. Discipline formed there does not fade, because it was never fueled by emotion. As you return to your own quiet moments, consider where you wait for permission that never comes. When silence offers you the first correct moment, do you step forward, or do you remain still and call it caution? If this reflection holds value, remain with the path. Like, share, and subscribe, not for noise, but for clarity.